All right, we're live.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is TIF briefing number 2. At anytime we talk about TIF in this meeting, that stands for tax increment financing. That is an economic development tool that is in common use across 50 to 51 states up until about 2 years ago. State of Washington is the last state that didn't have it. Now we finally do. And it's basically used to help with economic development projects where there's a public nexus to it, where the investment to make it goes beyond what could be reasonably seen by a developer to do, where it has like a regional or a larger impact. So within our proposed tax increment area, we have 4 projects, and you'll note that the amounts of money going to each one do not constitute the whole project. Merely with the money derived from this, we're hoping to use that as leverage to obtain outside grants to then finance the totality of it. So the 4 projects we're doing is Southwest Majania Road, which is in the city, and that goes from College to Blueview. And that would be for reconstructing all of it and also put utilities and fire hydrants and such. And that's going to be providing access to the new intermediate school and other areas out west. Also, for the first part of the new east-west road to go from the high school and College Avenue, and then it'll go out west eventually to the new intermediate school. Also do an intersection treatment with the new east-west road and College Avenue. And we'll do an engineering study to determine whether or not a stoplight or a traffic circle is in fact the best treatment. And they'll have public engagement opportunities. And then the 4th is something we've discussed for a long time, which is 2 public parking lots to be scattered up and down the College Avenue business corridor downtown, because a major thing stymieing development along that corridor has been that even now, if a developer wants to do a project, they need to account for the parking on the site, and the properties are really weirdly shaped. So with the 2 public parking lots, that essentially will allow the city to waive the parking requirement for the properties along the College Avenue corridor. And that corridor is College from the top of the hill of the 13th down to 4th. So by the Wawa University campus, and then north that campus from Whitman up to, in fact, the C Rose area. So those are the 4 projects. So now we'll go around for introductions, and then we'll launch into this presentation. So once again, I'm Mike Costello, City Administrator for City of College Place.
I'm Sherry St. Clair, City Clerk for City of College Place.
Brian Carlton, Finance Director for the city.
Thanks, Michael. I'm Bob Stowe, Stowe Development Strategies. I'm the lead consultant that's helped the city put together a project analysis that the state has considered. The project analysis is something that's required for any city that's going to consider adoption of a tax increment area, and that's largely what I'm going to be reviewing today. So this is a basic TIF model that Michael had described. It exists whether you're in Washington or across any of the other states. The difference in Washington's TIF legislation that it was designed to be impact neutral, in that the existing taxing district would not be harmed by the creation of a tax increment area within any jurisdiction. It also excludes any of the state's property taxes or voter approved levies from the analysis or from the incremental taxes. The existing taxing districts would continue to receive the existing tax base that they did prior to any establishment of the tax increment area. And so it's really just the incremental taxes that get generated from private development which is caused by the public improvements. And so today, to give you an overview of tax increment financing very quickly, it's available to cities, counties, and ports. It's a really powerful economic development tool, as the city administrator had mentioned. It's designed for a project specific rather than forming a tax increment area and then hope development will occur, because any debt or any infrastructure costs that the city pays for, they're responsible for that cost regardless if the private development occurs or not. As the city administrator mentioned, there is a nexus between the public investment and the public improvement, or the private development, and that's called the but for the public improvements, the development would not occur. And of course, when that development does happen, it results in new assessed value, some public benefits, gains the type of development that the city's interested in, and then along with some short and long-term jobs. And it's the taxes from that new development, that those incremental taxes above the base, that are used to pay for the public improvements. There's no additional tax burden upon taxpayers, and it's not a new tax regardless of the fact that it's called tax increment financing. It's simply utilizing the existing taxing levies that exist today. So the overview, some additional key elements include that, the city, county, and port, in order to form a tax increment area, would have to adopt an ordinance. That ordinance would identify the area, the public improvements, whether or not they're going to be financed. It also includes some limitations. Those limitations are that a city cannot adopt any more than 2 increment areas that are active at any one time. And the combination of those 2 increment areas cannot exceed more than $200 million of assessed valuation at the time that they're formed, or 20% of the total assessed valuation of the sponsoring entity, whichever is less. The city also would not be able to add any additional public improvements or change the boundary of the tax increment area after the ordinance is formed. The ordinance must also include a deadline as to when the public improvements will begin, and that's generally within 5 years after the adoption of the ordinance, unless there is good cause shown as to the need for a delay. And local government may only receive TIF revenues for a period of time that's necessary to pay for the debt improvement. So if they're issuing 20-year bonds, once those bonds are paid off, the TIA would expire at the conclusion or the expiration of those bonds in 20 years. And in no case can a local government have a tax increment area that's longer than 25 years after the adoption of the ordinance. And city administrator mentioned the 4 improvements. Here they are again: Majonia Road, $4.3 million. East-West Road, $1.9 million, signalization of College Avenue and East-West Road, $550,000, and the downtown parking lots, $1.4 million. Important to note, these are just the TIF contributions, and there's other sources of funds that will be combined, as the city administrator had mentioned, but this is simply what the TIF would contribute towards those projects. This is the tax increment area that represents 259 acres of land. And an AV of 43 million, so well within the $200 million limit. This is the taxable TIA levy at 4.17 in 2022 taxes. It'll be slightly adjusted for 2023, but you'll see that out of the total of $11.67, once you exclude the state property tax and other exempt levies, the TIA levy would be just over $4 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. When we look at the types of private development that might occur, we've been able to forecast, based on discussion with the city and discussion with area developers, the type of development, the value of that development, when that development may start, and then when the development may come online or be finished and occupied either by residents or by commercial businesses over the 25-year period. And so we've been able to determine that there'll be over $400 million of private investment caused by the public improvements that would be financed by the tax increment area. And we've indicated the year they'd be built, the value, the build out years over the 25-year period within these 5 different phases. This is a significant development that comprises most of that private investment. And you can see, based on the map, the developer is predicting a certain number of multifamily units, townhomes, workforce family units, and then some commercial development on a separate property owner. So city's debt capacity, if it were to issue all $8 million in debt, it would have a little over $4 million of non-voted debt capacity available to issue additional debt in 2023. So we looked at 3 different scenarios for the types of revenues that might get generated based on that baseline scenario. That baseline scenario represented the full development, likely the most aggressive type of development schedule, and then looked at 2 alternatives. The first alternative was to extend the build-out year of all development by twice the amount. So if we were anticipating something would take 4 years to build out, now in alternative 1, it would take 8 years. Then we also reduced the single-family home valuation, the cost that we were estimating something to be. If it were $400,000, we were reducing that then by 20%. And so that's what generated a new forecast for us in terms of private investment in alternative 1. Alternative 2, we did the same thing with the build out by doubling the time frame, but we also then reduced single family home value by 30%, reduced senior housing by 50%, and then included only the hotel development on the McKiernan parcel. And based on sort of a discount rate of 4.5% or 5%, this is what those various alternatives produce in terms of their ability to support public improvement costs. And so under the baseline and the 4.5% interest rate, the ability to support almost $17 million of public improvement costs. Alternative 1, 13.8, and then alternative 2, 9.9. And those numbers reduce a bit if interest rate were increased by 5%. There's also additional taxes that get generated from the development, and many times these exceed the amount of property taxes that would come from the increment area. In this case, the majority of the taxes would come from one-time construction sales tax, but under the baseline, the city would receive over a 25-year period if all development took place, just over $21.6 million. Alternative 2, 19.2 million. And then alternative 1, excuse me, and alternative 2 would be 6.9 million. In terms of jobs, we looked at both one-time construction related. So it ranges from 770 jobs construction to just over 1,100 jobs under the baseline. And then ongoing jobs, these would be jobs just that would be retained and supporting any commercial development inside the TIA, between 40 and 230 jobs. Looked at what the assessed valuation might be without any type of public improvement. And so you can see in the assessment year and 5-year increments, under the baseline, it starts off on 184 million and it goes up to 858 million by 2048. But with no TIF, in other words, no public improvements, remains rather low at $38 million in 2028. It does climb in 2048 to 168 million, but well below what the total AV would be for any of the public improvement scenarios. This is a level debt. If you were to take $8 million at 4.5% and simply spread that across evenly across this period of time, 20 years, you'd have $629,000 of annual debt service. A lot of information on this slide, but what you want to take from it is all the areas that in red, these are all the various scenarios, but all the areas in red indicate that where you'd have a deficit, meaning that you'd have to find some interim financing in order to pay yourself back, for the city to pay itself back until the development stabilizes and starts producing more revenue on an annual basis than what's costing you at $680,000 of level debt service annually. We looked at a couple other scenarios too, and there's more scenarios inside the project analysis, but this scenario 1 at the top is split debt, alternative 1, which means that when we looked at alternative 1 scenario as the most likely development scenario, but then we split the debt, $4.3 million, which would be the amount covering Majorna Road, and then the remainder of the debt 3.8 million would come online in 2028 or would be issued in 2028. What that does, it reduces the sort of the baseline scenario from $2.7 million of sort of interim financing need down to 1.5 million over a period of 7 years. If you looked at just issuing the full debt, in other words, no split, just issued $8 million and did interest only for 5 years, you'd still have 7 years of deficits, but the number of total amount goes from 2.7 to $1.7 million. Another scenario would be applying the additional taxes that the city might receive and then doing interest only for the first 5 years. And this is based on the full issuance of $8 million. That does drop the number of years in which you'd have to have some interim financing down to 4 years of deficits. Again, based on kind of the baseline scenario from 2.7 million to 1.5 million. And the last was if you issued the debt in two issuances, one in 2024, another in 2028, apply the additional taxes that you likely might receive, and then interest only for the first 5 years. You can see you don't have any years of deficits in terms of being able to support the debt service. And then I'll finish with just a quick timeline. As I mentioned, the project analysis has been completed and submitted to the Office of the State Treasurer, which is required to review all the project analyses for jurisdictions that want to form a TIA. They have submitted their recommendation letter and have concluded that the TIA meets the requirements of the state legislation. The city's done some early outreach with some of the impacted taxing districts. It's had some discussions with its city council. Now it's scheduled in May to, we're finishing up the public briefings with this second public briefing. Later this month, the council will consider the adoption of the tax increment area ordinance, and then implementation would follow after that adoption of the ordinance, and that the city would execute likely some development agreements with any area developers to provide more predictability in terms of when development will occur. It will evaluate the development readiness and market to make sure that when it does issue the debt, and the adoption of the tax increment area ordinance does not mean that any debt will be issued. It just would allow for the city council to issue that debt at some time in the future. But at this point, the project analysis had predicted that that might occur in 2024. And then, of course, the city would monitor development activity, especially important if it was going to issue more than one debt issuance, and another might be tied to how much development is ready to occur at any one time. And that finishes my presentation. I'd be glad to address any questions and turn it back over to Michael.
Okay. Well, I'll provide the summary of what you heard. So basically the whole purpose is tax increment finance in this proposed district is to provide some leverage money, get some additional grants and leverage money from the developers to help finance this infrastructure, because a lot of it is having to be overbuilt since it's infrastructure for a regional nexus. So for instance, Southwest Majania Road does not merely end when the city borders. It extends to the west, it goes all the way to Frog Hollow and points beyond. And that's gonna have to accommodate in a future bus traffic, since College Place Public School District 250 bought about 40 acres of land on Southwest Teal at the end of it for a future intermediate school. Likewise, that east-west road, same thing. That's going to be one of the access points to connect the high school and the intermediate school together. And that intersection, new intersection is going to have to accommodate the traffic. And then for the downtown area, it is getting those shared public parking lots, so that way the property owners have options, and they don't have to worry about providing that parking on site, because with the narrow long lots, that has proven to be a real obstacle over the last several years. So that's the purpose with that. As far as protecting ourselves. We're in the middle of negotiating a developer agreement with the Lakeside Group. They are the development group that now controls the former Craig Christensen property. And then we're also getting development agreements lined out with some of the other players as well. So this definitely is real in the future, development potential here. And we just essentially need this to be able to build the infrastructure the correct way the first time to accommodate population now and in the future. So we aren't having to go back and upgrade infrastructure in the future, do it the correct way the first time. And then this has gone through Economic Development Commission. They've approved pursuing this tax increment financing. And then the city council has been appraised of all this as well over the last year approximately. So pathway forward on this is that at the last council meeting in the month of May, so I believe May 25th, 7 p.m. The tax increment financing ordinance will go before them for a decision point on to approve or not. That is not doing the debt issuance or anything else. That's just merely creating the district. And then as you saw in Mr. Stowe's presentation, decision points about which way to go and the debt issuance, and then figuring all that out, that comes in the implementation steps after this district is approved. This document has gone before the state treasurer's office, and they've reviewed all of this for its soundness and making sure it drives with all state tax increment finance legislation, which has been a tall order because this was first created 2 years ago, and then there was a minor update this biennium as well, and it does. So that provides a linear pathway forward of this. If there's any questions, please let me know. Also, I can be reached via email. MRIZZITIELLO@cpwa.us, or my office phone, 509-394-8506. Okay, any questions?
There's no one in the attendance list.
Okay. Well, with that, that will now conclude this TIF briefing number 2, and then this topic will come up at the council meeting at the end of the month. So with that, have a good day, everyone. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.